Aloha, wherever you are in the world. I hope you're having a good day or evening and continuing to send prayers and monetary donations if you can to the smallest local outfits that you can in Maui to make sure that there's the best chance of the folks there that are suffering to get some assistance. So what do we know after a month of the horrific fires? Some are calling the Maui Massacre, some are calling wildfires. But how wild they are is something I've posted in other videos. So what do we know? Well, we do know that after a month, we probably know precious little more than we did before. I think one of the best ways that they made sure to limit the conversation and transparency is they made sure to sue the Hawaiian Electric Company, HECO, and sue others, because once you start doing that, then they can't talk and it gives an excuse. And Governor Green mentioned this as well in his news conference, circus, whatever. So what he talked about there was, once again, seemingly playing fast and loose with the numbers on a previous conference or circus, whatever you want to call it. He came up with a drastically lower number. And the next day, actually I think even hours after, 2 hours later, they changed the numbers again, drastically back up where they were before. So we're not getting transparency, we're not getting information. Most of the locals aren't getting what they need. And he does say that he's heartbroken. He doesn't act it, but he says it. He is the most robot type politician I've ever seen. I'm always amazed that he became a lieutenant governor, much less governor. Although his role in COVID as lieutenant governor was quite good, because I think it was, they knew that as a doctor coming in that he'd have a certain gravitas, shall we say, to produce the draconian measures that they did in Hawaii that made the people, I think, actually suffer more than if they actually had the truth. And if they had the medicines proactively, that would have helped them. That's another topic, but everything's related, so I had to put it in there. We've also had one of the senators talk about what happened, and almost everything out of his mouth on the Senate floor was either a slight, major, or dramatic misrepresentation or outright lie. It's just amazing. We don't hear from the police chief anymore. We almost never hear from the fire chief. And I think there was a fire here, right? But you never hear from the fire chief. And of course, as we know, it took days for them to speak. And of course, coincidentally enough, people talk about how we had the police chief at the largest shooting. He was incident commander for that in Vegas. And some will say that he beat out 4 locals. And that's a travesty, assuming they were more qualified than him, and I think they were. You've also got the mayor, who I don't know if he doesn't know how to be a politician because he was a judge for so long. And that's where the arrogance comes in, most likely. But as a human, all these folks are just not good humans. I mean, let's just put it to you that way. I was so disappointed when Tulsi wanted to only run for president, not also run for Congress. And now he's paying the price for that. Her humanity on Joe Rogan was always evident, and especially there. So, am I breaking any new news to you? No, not really. But I do think we need to start looking at some of the other issues. Some people are saying whether it's real, it's due, it's whatever, the blue umbrellas. Some of this stuff could be, you have to realize, is it purposely set? There are some fire chiefs and others that think so. It looks like a lot of the horrible fires where things burned to the ground, where they burned just simply too hot, way too hot. hot to the point of melting aluminum. One of the persons said, a politician claimed that melted an engine block. If that's the case, that's horrifically high. That might be even higher than melting glass, which has been highlighted. So we're talking temperatures that could be double or more, or even triple what they should be with a normal grass fire. So A, that doesn't add up, number one. Number two, like most of these issues that happen with these horrific events, either two things happen. Either A, there happens to be a multi-jurisdictional exercise, or people are out of town. They kind of got a little bit of both in this case, right? We had the FEMA conference that just happened to be on a different island. And the governor, I assume with his yellow Band-Aids he loves so much on his fingers or thumb, was over at a family reunion on the East Coast. But you've also got something that is just really, I'm going to put it out there, but I don't know what to think about it, which is we're getting very sketchy information, but there's a Khazarian connection here, Khazarian mafia specifically, that is a bit concerning because that was tied into 9/11. Now that we're around the 9/11 time frame, where basically people were told of Jewish descent, don't come into work. Supposedly something like that was happening in Lahaina. The other thing that's been happening that's controversial, no one really talks about that. The other more controversial topic is where are the kids? And I don't know what to think about that. Because I heard something that was concerning, which is something like 2,000 kids go missing in Hawaii a year. I'm like, what? Excuse me? Are you kidding me? If we have 20 going missing a year, that's 20 too many. I don't know what to think about that. Did that many go off island? The Department of Education is not, they're just speechless. The amount of lack of urgency. Yes, a lot of school buses have gone missing. Are they going to be found somewhere in some private fenced off area or someplace like that? Potentially. But why aren't we having more communication? Why is it such a little amount of communication? And why aren't the people allowed back into their homes? Even if it's completely suited up with protection. One of the fire chiefs, I can link the article, talks about the dangers. Obviously, you could step through something, what you think is solid ground could be ash. You could be cut. So you need rugged boots, you need full protection. And basically what you need to do, is obviously gloved, and whatever you take out, when you leave the premises, you basically need to take off of you and gets thrown away. And any debris or things like that would probably have to be cleaned before you want to put them in your car, much less take them to your temporary home. But individually, it's a travesty that people are kept away from their homes for so long. So you say one thing, so you want to get back to the governor. The governor says, with a heavy heart, 115 and all that bad acting that he does. And I'm not a critique on acting. I'm trying to be polite about that because I fear, he's just a World Economic Forum tool. And he was at the United Nations, and he stated again he's going to go to the United Nations again. And most of these events, when they are pre-designed like this, have multiple effects. It's the near term, the medium term, the long term. The long term is usually to justify climate change, to try to tie this into climate change. And he's pushing that hard. Land grab, that people say? Absolutely. Get more Hawaiians off the islands? Absolutely. There are more Hawaiians off the islands on the mainland and other parts of the world than in the Hawaiian Islands. So he's going to go to the United Nations. Does that mean he's going to potentially be in the run for 2028 or something? Or is he 2024 because Dementia Biden came in and he's, the tool and FEMA's the tool? Are they going to do something else? Is he going to be the hero? Is there something else that's coming on? What's the long-term play? So every time, basically, we don't know this, but it's speculation, but you look back at all these horrific events, there's always multiple goals that they want to do. The other thing with 9/11 is 1993, right? They had the bombing in the basement. And quite often what they do with these mass events is they have a test event before. About 5 years, right? The fires in Lahaina. Was that a test run for this event? The other things that really no one's talking about is other than the fire chief, which once again I'll put a link down below, talks about the multi-layered events here. So yes, some people are talking about dew, but the dew could be laser, could be microwave, it could be smart meters he brought up. That there are certain ways that smart meters can pulse through so much of an overload that a fire gets created through the electrical wiring of the house. Now, whether or not this can happen, I don't know, but on an accidental basis, it has been known to happen. Could some sort of rogue organization control this? Could an organization remotely turn on or off electrical for HECO? Even with like bypassing HECO's controls, can that be done? Getting back to HECO, so they were actually trying to, during the evacuation, around 4 o'clock, 4:30, they're trying to put some lines back up. So you start to wonder, when they were asked for the mayor, Bisson didn't know who was in control. He wouldn't answer who's in the central command and control structure. Didn't talk about, don't they have drills for this? Shouldn't it be drilled at least every quarter, right? If the alarms go off, the sirens, first of every month, that's another lie that they're doing, is they're talking about how it's simplifying and not going into detail about the multi-layered system for the sirens and notifications. It is so multi-level. It is literally the best in the US and one of the best in the world, if not the best, for all the different situations. The other issue is that no one's talking about is almost no one. There's a few individual media types that are asking difficult questions, like the kids and other things. But even the independents aren't asking, well, wait a second. Why did the cell phone towers go down? Did the police and fire have communication or not? Why were the radios working or not for emergency people? There was no reverse cellular communication that you can with text. That is a standard operating procedure. This does not make sense that cell towers are going down the power. Speaking of power, it's also mentioned that the fire department did not have water. Now, one of the persons talked about in another video that the water has to be piped up into one of the storage facilities at the water treatment facility. Did that go down? And if that went down, that's absolutely insane that there's not any way to control it, especially with the gigantic amount of solar that they have there. They couldn't have at least worked with Tesla and try to get some sort of battery backup system with something that is totally robust. That does not make any sense whatsoever. Obviously, you heard about how the water was delayed up to 6 hours. That's obviously insane. That doesn't make any sense. And one of my previous videos, I'm not sure if you knew I was joking or not joking, the Japanese have always had a very strong presence on the Hawaiian Islands. I was not kidding when I was talking about seppuku. If these folks had any honor, they would tell their truth and be truthful and then self-sacrifice. I'm not claiming anyone would do violence to them, but if they had any honor, that's what they would do. Because all fingers point to the fact that this Maui massacre was deliberate. Because look at the blockades, for example, just one of the many examples. We also know that the fire is way too hot, way too fast. So the governor makes an interesting lie among many. And this is a lie. He said it all happened in 1 hour. And we're talking over hours. The main event was at least 3 hours. Yes, the main crush or push was about an hour, but we're talking hours. So he makes it feel as if it's so fast, there's nothing that we could do. Well, number one, where's your game plan? And even if your number one in each department is off site at this FEMA event, whatever, doesn't your number two and number three have to do? So the reason why I say it was deliberate, they created a gauntlet, a narrative. Just like the Ukraine war is a narrative. Everything's done as a narrative these days, as a Hollywood event type of a situation. To pin people in, maximize the amount of people for media exposure. You're going to see tens or hundreds of cars. So the police are looking at this, and Jeremy Lee, the reporter, was commenting about how, he interviewed someone and they were here for 20 minutes, here another place for 20 minutes. They can't see all these people coming in. They can't see just the smoke billowing that is darker and darker and darker as the minutes go by. They can't simply go around the corner onto Kiave, onto the extension to go toward the bypass. Literally, we're talking, leave a car there. In one place, there was only one person, but in many cases, there were several squad cars. One of the persons couldn't have gone up and down and figured out how to way to do this. A policeman couldn't have talked to the HECO personnel saying, stop trying to reinstall the poles. Yank them off the street. If HECO was there, why didn't HECO just simply, if they are de-energized poles, why didn't they work like mad just to pull them off the roadway, right? If they did that, they could immediately make sure that at least those 2 lanes heading out to the bypass would have been good to go. Another policeman could have checked the bypass where supposedly there was grass fires. The firefighter said it's one thing to go through a forest fire, it's another to go through a grass fire. Cars can literally drive through there. So if it was burning even across the road and some of the flames were going through, you could actually drive there. So why wasn't that done? And why aren't reporters asking these questions? Well, it's because they're being hand-picked reporters. So we have a bunch of news reporters that are quizzlings that are not asking simple, obvious common sense questions. I don't know how the policeman can sleep at night, but knowing that you block people in, literally hundreds of people. And now they're telling us that, well, they all jumped out of their car. Well, we don't know that. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, to go into the water. Well, how many survived? They're also saying, well, no. 184 people weren't found on another island. Once again, how do we know they're telling the truth? Because they've been lying about so much. There's lies of omission and commission, and they're doing both. And this is typical of a web operation, right? We're talking World Economic Forum. Last conference, the governor started to say smart cities to the point where it says smart, and he got the CI out and then had to backtrack, change it, and then talk about the smart legislatures. And his cover-up was to try to say, and if you don't agree with the climate change, dumb legislatures. The ends justify the means. This is really what we're talking about here. So what's the answer? And who, not just who's behind it. I think we have some ideas, but the problem is if you say who's behind it, does that mean that YouTube and everybody cuts you off? My biggest clue to this is you have to look at who has the means, the motivation, who's going to benefit from it. But more importantly, you have to realize that all these operations, when they've been done around the world, they really compartmentalize things. So people don't realize the whole concept of everything that's done until after it's done. But even then you say, well, why do you keep working? I think it was Mark Twain that said it's really hard for someone to not do something when their livelihood depends on it. So yes, their livelihood depends on it. But there's also, when you listen to whistleblowers that have come out, their lives have been basically eviscerated. They get threatened that their family and kids may be thrown in prison or killed. So it is a huge risk for someone to be a whistleblower. So that's why when people say, oh, why aren't there whistleblowers about X, Y, or Z? That's why. The government controls on you are so severe. However, I think it goes beyond just our internal government. It goes to other forces outside that are used, tied in, and some of the people that are, shall we say, receptive to the ideals of, yes, I'm going to say it, the Khazarian Mafia. That goes back, literally, look at the history of these psychopaths. They have no qualms doing anything. These are the key people behind the Mossad who will literally do anything. There is no moral bridge that they have trouble crossing. There is no... You have to put yourself into their shoes, right? They say you need to be in someone else's shoes. The problem with most people in the United States, and specifically Hawaii, is you think people can't be this nuts, people can't be this crazy. But to the Hawaiians and the people that have been in Hawaii for generations that may or may not be Hawaiian, look at what generations of colonization has done. Look at the illegal occupation and overthrow. And look at all it's done. Not just to overthrowing the kingdom, to taking your land, taking your water resources, killing your people, basically outlawing your culture as a whole, practicing apartheid, ethnic cleansing, genocide, terrorizing you for centuries. So starting a fire and calling it a natural wildfire is beyond the scope. I know there are some people all around the world, including Hawaiians, that think if you even bring this up, do microwave anything, no, that hurts their cause. Side note, going back to the PSYOPs, just because this thing blew, people could have put in blue cars, blue umbrellas, blue t-shirts, whatever, later, just to throw people off, to make people sound crazy. This is part of what they do. And part of this conversation has been made legal, thank you, Bush and Obama, to have people in the government actually engage in social media shenanigans. So you need to know that. It's a little aside, but so if they're willing to do this, why do you think they would have no qualms creating this? So when I say this also, I mean, I don't have proof, but let's just look at what's technically possible. Geo-weather modification. Since at least 1945, 1948, the US and China have robust geo-weather engineering programs. The winds has been reported 70, 90 miles an hour. Some have stated, no, it's probably more like 40 to 50 miles an hour. And that was created because supposedly the hurricane tracked 500 miles away, was slowed down, and another high pressure was built up, and so created basically a wind tunnel. Can that be done? Yes. Was it done? I don't know, but it's feasible. Another video, they talked about how very close to Mexico was a hurricane, 25 miles away, and the winds weren't high. So it doesn't sound like, nothing sounds natural on this. And like the fire chief, the fire veteran of 33 years stated, he thinks it's a multi-level, multi-technology attack for this Maui Massacre. So that's where we're at. But what do you do? How do you change it? How do you do anything? You've got the governor, day three, almost no one's in there, no resources. They're blocking up. Now that's when they're starting to block off the locals from actually delivering supplies. And Governor Josh Green, with his lovely bedside manner, says, I'm going to take some of this money for this land for workforce housing and build a memorial. The gall. There is no humanity in that. That is absolutely insane. My first thought was, you need to recall him. They all need to be recalled. Bisson, all the rest. That could be an option. But what's really going to solve it? 1993 was an apology. Some people call it a bill. Some people call it a resolution. had like 27 whereases. It essentially was nothing. It was an apology without any change, which is about as good as the lame-ass apology that Governor Green does. And hell, Bisson doesn't even do an apology. So you've got, let's say, 300,000 Hawaiians in Hawaii. It's about the same number you had pre-contact after so many were killed off. You got maybe, 370,000 Hawaiians off island? How do you change it? You've got politicians that are bought, paid, and sold for, and that includes judges. Was it taken almost 30 years to try to get local Hawaiians to get some sort of relief? And right about the time they're supposed to get the relief in late September, oh, what happens, a month and a half before that? Oh, massive fire. Coincidence? Seriously. There are no coincidences. That's what we need to learn if we haven't learned that lesson for the last decades that these fires have been going on. That's the point. Then that's the problem. You have a fire captain in San Diego says, well, I've seen this before. This is nothing new. Well, yeah, that's the point. They've been doing these fires for so long. Not burning at 1,200 degrees, but burning 25 to 3,000 to 3,500 degrees. That twisted the mobile home foundations. Just twisted steel, not aluminum. And Paradise Fire. Look at how Tubbs Fire, all these different fires you have. Northern California, Southern California, West Coast, Australia, Canada. This shit ain't real, folks. Do we really have all these dry lightning strikes in California that started all these fires? I don't think so. So how do you change it? What do you do? To me, the only answer, and I think there's a window of time, and it's a short window of time. We're talking like 12 to 18 months, that the Hawaiians need to really get their kingdom back. And there's certain Hawaiians that don't want haoles to do anything with them. This is like the women that blame Alan Alda because he's one of the best feminists that women have ever had, but they're always critical of Alan Alda because he's a guy. Whatever. He's a great ally. If there's haoles that have lived there for generations, or mixed marriages, or they're around the world. One of the great YouTubers from Germany has a really heartfelt presentation, and he's in Germany, but he's been to Lanai like 18 times. What you need is to basically be in a DeLorean with a time machine and take it back to say, if I want to rebuild not just Lahaina, as it was 2 months ago, so let's say. No, I think you want to rebuild it at least before the kingdom was overthrown, if not pre-contact. Anything short of that is horrible. Hillary Clinton is famous for saying, never let a crisis go to waste. I think it's time that the tables get turned, because this was part of a massive land grab. But I think it is a way to use their own words against them. So here's a few recommendations I think could be good to get people in. To say that maybe we agree with the World Economic Forum. You should own nothing and be happy. Well, I think the best way to start that is with all these fraudulent, fake billionaires that are tool of the U.S. government and other agencies. Yes, I'm talking about Oprah. I'm talking about Zuckerberg. I'm talking about Bezos. I'm talking about Larry Ellison. And how does Oprah get 870 acres for $6.6 million? Where's the investigation there? How long is the statute of limitations for fraud? How can that not be? And that's just not possible to get that much acreage for that literal pittance on the dollar. But you've also got all the different land on both sides of the bypass that needs to be taken care of. You've got the water rights issues that are completely out of control for literally since pre-contact, that they've been stealing the resources. So my suggestion, many-fold, is do rallying cries to everybody. Say, how can we what would you get behind? I mean, the only way you can change this, I can't see how you can change this and have Hawaii be part of the United States, because there's no way in the corrupt system of the United States that it's going to be allowed to happen. From a money standpoint, from the resources standpoint, there's just no way. Maybe you can see it. I cannot see it. So it seems to me, I mean, the fastest course of action is not the best. So you need a little bit of a longer. So how do you do it? I don't know. But the French Revolution, people didn't think that was going to happen either. But I think Hawaii could be the tail that wags the dog. So the key thing I would point out to folks is, and I think Eric West has done this remarkably well, and he's had a local Hawaiian that has just eviscerated him for it, because I don't think he likes bringing up the do and all the other stuff that's been happening. But and he really doesn't like it because he's selling Hawaiian real estate. He's got a great point. Does anybody deserve land rights? But I think the ones that don't deserve the land rights the most are any of these super rich individuals and these mega corporations. Because a lot of these people go back all the way down to the Committee of Safety folks that overthrew the Queen. So it seems to me what you kind of have to do is you have to look at the current rash of billionaires that may have little to do with Hawaii. And I think their assets, everything needs to be taken. It's ill-begotten goodies, as they would say. And I think you also need to go all the way back, even pre-Committee of Safety. I always love these. It's like a U.S. thing when they make these things which are the opposite of what they title them. Congress does this for almost every single bill they do. It's just a travesty. How would you track back all the money associated with it? You know, I know someone said their descendants aren't responsible for their ancestors. Seriously? That's where you go like, are you fucking kidding me? All of the money, all of the risks they're able to take, all the control, the hundreds of millions of gallons of fresh water hijacked daily, just on Maui. No. These lush paradises were turned into monocultures and just annihilated. This is why it went from being lush to being a drought-stricken island. Not to mention the other islands, what has been done to them. I don't know. I would look and see, you know, what happens with the other folks. All the way back. Yeah, I think you got to go all the way back to contact and say, who got rich? Who got rich off the Hawaiians? And how do we? Basically, in a car, you would say you unroll the deal, or you got to roll it back. How do you roll everything back? And to me, that would include the land, the money, all assets. And the other elephant in the room is the U.S. government has been a one-sided player, especially with the military. Look at how much they've just eviscerated one island, for example, how they've contaminated all of the islands, into a purposely piss-poor job of cleaning them up. I think they need to pay dearly. And they also need to pay dearly for this. The other reason that something has to change, for these insurance companies to say, oh no, we're not going to pay because there's a natural disaster. This is why it matters. It has to be proven that this is not a natural disaster. These insurance companies cannot hide behind it. Now, if the insurance companies can't afford it, that's another issue. But I think the money has to come straight from the U.S. Defense Department budget, because the attack is essentially all within the DoD and secret intelligence community. So that's who needs to pay for it. Plus, I think people need to go to jail. People need to be, I'm not into the death penalty, but maybe the Hawaiians can come up with some sort of a, shall we say, Captain Cook solution to mete out justice. I think the Hawaiians are going to be the ones that need to show both their aloha as well as their warrior spirit. And I think the warrior spirit is really what's needed here. I think enough aloha has been done, and it's been basically tread on for, what do you want to say, 200 plus years? You know, how much more can these people take? And it's disheartening, just to think about it, but I'm not living it. I mean, look at all the people that are having to live it, and they can't even come back and see their land. They have a governor that says one thing, and if he really meant what he said, he would take back all those executive orders that he did. An eighth proclamation he did, but he doesn't take them back. So why do you trust this guy? And he's just name dropping, like, I'm gonna be at the United Nations again. Well, whoopee fucking do. So you're building your political career based on how you react from the suffering of others. There's a tradition of that. Dianne Feinstein did that. Look what kind of career she launched out of with the killing of George Moscone and Harvey Milk. She did not let that crisis go to waste. Read Jack Herrera's book and comments on that if you want something else. I'm not even going to go there. But what can be done to Hawaii? I think the Hawaiians need to get their warrior spirit. I think they need to be willing to have partners. And people on the mainland, people around the world need to come up and say, how can we help liberate the Hawaiians? Because by helping to liberate the Hawaiians, we can be liberated. Hawaii can and should be the tail that wags the dog. They never should have been illegally occupied, much less annexed, much less become a state. And then our folks from Puerto Rico, our friends there, need to say, hey, wait a second. A lot of the same crap going down in Hawaii is exactly what they've been doing here. So I think Puerto Rico needs to look at that. And then, yes, I know Guam and some other territories have some other ideas as well. But once again, the tail that wags the dog, we need to figure out how to help Hawaii. There's a limited time window when I think people are so upset, and the more the truth will dribble out, not because they want it to come out, but we need to make it come out. We need to find whistleblowers. We need to find a way to protect them, because the only way you can protect them and their family is the only way you're going to get them to talk. It's the only way you're going to get the truth, because these people are in fear for their life if they tell the truth. And the sad thing is, you have to remember that almost no one knows what the total truth is. They'll only know what their little bit part in it is, right? But let me try to wrap this up in one last thing to get back to the police again. All they had to do was stop the people from coming north and come from the south, number one. Number two, they should have actually had a cop move and try to find out what the situation is. Number three, they should have worked with Hawaiian elected, with HECO, to start moving the lines off of the street. One guy did it with a branch. Basically, even having said that, even HECO did nothing. If the police let them through, we probably could have saved almost everybody. But if the police just did a little bit of common sense up here, instead of I'm following orders, as the local celebrity hat maker Fish says, you got to let people through. The police did not want to listen to an ordinary person because the police knew better. You all couldn't work together. You all didn't game plan some of these crises. All they care about is covering their ass in this many hours fire. It's not a matter of who's to blame right now. Bigger issue still, I think, is how do you change it? How do you turn the tables? Because the powers that be are absolutely nuts and are willing to do anything. Challenge is, how do you be willing to do anything, but knowing the fact that most of the things that you could potentially do are illegal. Even if they're moral, they might be illegal. I don't have an answer to that, but I think what we need to see is there a way to turn the tables and take the kingdom back. That's the only way to do it. And then once you take the kingdom back, then you can start to negotiate things like Pearl Harbor. You can start to negotiate all sorts of trade agreements. You can actually become independent and have a better healthcare system than the mainland is shoving down your throat. You can actually address climate change and how you would actually do it. And if there is such a thing as climate change, and I believe there is, but who's behind it? And it's not what you think, it's not what you're told. Geo-weather engineering is the key driver behind the forced climate change, with the particles in the air from jet fuel that also made these fires burn hotter. Very few people are talking about that to get back to the fire. Once again, multi-tiered, multi-level efforts. Was this tested before 5 years ago in Lahaina? And how do we get back to where it should be? Some locals are saying this should not be rebuilt as a tourist town. I think she should be listened to. I think they all should be listened to. I think we need to think out of the box. There is enough land, I think, in Hawaii with the proper stewardship where creative solutions can happen. The problem is these greedy bastards don't want to cede any control. They want it done their way. But to my way of thinking, they're just an umpteenth generation of occupier, illegally occupying, controlling, and stealing the resources from the Hawaiian people. Last thing I'll leave it with, all these solutions. Can you bring back the Kingdom of Hawaii? How do you get as many Hawaiians that are not on the islands to come back? And how do you make it affordable for them to come back? I think there are a lot of good ideas we can investigate in other videos, but I'll leave it there. But just like in Israel, Palestinians should have a right of return. It needs to be baked into the solutions with the Hawaiian Islands and the kingdom. Getting the kingdom back, by definition, means come home. Your ancestors will love that. And how can the ancestors and everyone alive now all work together? I'm not the expert on that, but there are people here that I know that are experts. And a few of them are on YouTube, and they need a lot more focus of how to bring this all back and correct approximately 200 years of just illegal occupation, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, genocide, terrorism, etc. All of it. Thank you for listening. That was a long video. Mahalo.